Good evening. My name is Wallace Bradley, and I'm the host of the Bradley Report. I'm also the president of United in Peace, Inc. Got a very interesting show. The topics that was put together for this show, and as you know, this show is being presented by United in Peace, Inc. The producer of this show is none other than the chairman of United in Peace, Inc., none other than Terry Marsh Bradley. It's my wife. We got some very interesting things for you this evening. Everybody was talking about the migrants versus the homeless, and that the mayor had to make a decision between the migrants and the homeless. Find shelter for either one or find shelter together. Where the mayor has put together a proposal or a project, call it what you will, where he's putting a program together to make it where he can deal with the migrants and the homeless at the same time by them both being a part of one program. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the city council, the budget committee, was considering voting on a proposal that the mayor had out there to help get some money to help close the budget hole. And as you know, nationally, Liz Cheney and Vice President Kamala Harris has been campaigning together, hitting the major states that they need together, going into the suburbs, talking to all the women. We're going to show you that. But one of the things that's very important and very key, we had 14 days, 15 days, 2 weeks, 14 days before the election. So I'm encouraging everyone, get out there and vote. Vote early. Call your relatives in them swing states. Georgia, if you got somebody in Las Vegas, anywhere, Nevada, anywhere, call them and tell them to vote early. The voting lines for early voting, they say in Georgia, was over 600,000, close to 1 million by now. In Texas, long lines, everywhere. I voted early. Me and my son went together to vote early, so our vote is in there and can be counted. If you got friends in Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, or anywhere in Michigan, if you got friends or family in Wisconsin, be it Milwaukee, or anywhere in Wisconsin, call them and let them know the importance for them to come out and vote. And me personally, you can vote for whoever you want to vote for. But I'm a Democrat, so I'm telling everybody to come out and vote straight Democrat. Become Project 2024, the alternative to Project 2025. So without further ado, we're going to get into this show, very important for you. So Sister Amani, let's go to work.
Co-reporter Taman Bradley starts us off by joining us with the details. Taman.
Ray and Micah, good evening. Faced with a staggering budget deficit, the Johnson administration has announced a major overhaul of migrant services.
Chicago is set to end its migrant shelter system. By the end of the year, the Johnson administration will combine efforts to help migrants and the homeless. New arrivals will no longer be guaranteed a shelter bed.
We are now able to shift from a large-scale crisis response to a more cost-effective, equitable, and strategic approach that addresses homelessness for all who need support.
Under the shift, the city is eliminating 30-day shelter extensions for most residents, changing hours of the landing zone, closing the State of Illinois Intake Center, and saying that only migrants who've been in the country less than a month will be eligible for a shelter spot. The overhaul comes 1 year after busloads of migrants from the southern border arrived almost every day. The influx overwhelmed city resources and led to migrants sleeping at police stations and airports.
At the peak, there were 12 to 15 buses arriving daily and 15,000 beds in operation.
Since August 2022, when Texas Governor Greg Abbott's busing program began, just over 50,000 migrants have come to Chicago. This morning, there were 4,996 residents in 13 shelters and 21 people awaiting placement.
I just want the people of Chicago to know how appreciative I am of their dopeness. There's nowhere else on the planet that has been able to stand the test of time in this crisis.
The changes come as the mayor wrestles with a nearly $1 billion budget shortfall. The one shelter system will add 3,800 beds. Mayor Johnson is not ready to say how much that's going to cost.
There will be an ask, but the ask is to respond to this one shelter system. That is the ask. We're asking City Council, the city of Chicago, to embrace an historic moment.
Today, Governor Pritzker said the state, which has partnered with Chicago in the humanitarian effort, worked on the revised plan.
I think everybody understands we all have the interests of the community as well as the migrants in mind.
This belt tightening follows the defeat earlier this year of Bring Chicago Home, a tax on high-end real estate transfers to fund homeless services. Mayor Johnson says if that had passed, Chicago would be able to accommodate more migrants. Ray and Micah?
All right. Taman, thanks so much.
You know, it's wonderful to see the governor and the mayor coming together to find a solution to a problem that's affecting the state, the county, and the city. That's good governance. Another thing that been coming up, the mayor has a proposal that came before the Budget Committee, Chicago City Council Budget Committee, dealing with a proposal, I think it was 1.2 billion or 1.5 billion to get things moving before he have his address for the budget, because it's time for the city to get things together for their budget to present to the people. So, Sister Monty, could you play that piece for me?
Budget gap.
Council members are taking action on a controversial $1.5 billion borrowing proposal this afternoon. And political reporter Paris Schutz is at City Hall with the latest on this story. Paris?
Silly and Terrence, you know, in a situation like this, typically a city has three options: raise taxes, cut spending, or borrow more money. And just about a half an hour ago, city council members voted 35-12 for that third option, this controversial plan to refinance $1.5 billion in debt that the mayor has proposed. Now, he's saying the city can get a better interest rate and save $90 million by doing so. Aldermen signed on board. They say it is a good deal for taxpayers.
Rather than what people might think of as scoop and toss, this debt is at the end of its term, we're just refinancing it for another 30 years. This is debt that we genuinely are getting a lower interest rate, saving on our payments. It has benefits for 2024 and 2025 and beyond.
But this isn't the universal sentiment. State Comptroller Susana Mendoza has argued against this. Other alders say when they go to the market, they don't really know what the rate's going to be. It could be really bad, and it could cost the city more in the long term. Among those skeptics, Second Ward Alderman Brian Hopkins. He says this is going to end up being a risky deal for Chicago taxpayers.
There is absolutely no way that we could gain the savings we were promised when this deal was first presented to the City Council over 2 months ago. So without making those adjustments now, we're basically flying blind. I don't trust the figures from this administration that I've been given. I can't support this right now. We'd be incurring additional debt. That is not the right thing to do right now as we're going into budget season.
And again, the mayor is saying this is going to save the city $90 million. We'll have to see. The proof will be in the pudding, but he has baked this into his budget. Just over $900 million in a budget deficit to go. And future meetings over the next month will determine how the city exactly is going to close that. Sylvia and Terrence.
You know, one thing I can say, the mayor, in my opinion, has come to the conclusion that the people in the city of Chicago elected him because they was tired of how the city was being ran before, especially African Americans. What do you mean by that, Gator? I'm glad you asked. When he had that press conference a while back, maybe about 2-3 weeks ago, where he had to let it be known, when everybody had a problem with him getting rid of the school board and him doing this and him doing that. And he had to remind a lot of people that by law, he has a right, once that he's elected, to do what he feels is right. If he got to get rid of a board, to bring in another board, to push the agenda that the people elected him because of his agenda. And he's making the right moves now, in my opinion. You can disagree however way you want to do it. Y'all know how the Dailies did it. The Dailies did it for almost 40 years. 20-something years for the daddy and 20-something years for the son. But what this mayor is doing, again, in my opinion, he's saying he want to be a mayor for all the people, including those who are against him. The difference between him and all the other mayors, Rahm included, Valandit, they were for the people, but they excluded the concerns of African Americans, all of them. This is the first mayor that by law is letting everyone know he has a right to be about all the people in the city of Chicago, inclusive, not exclusive, not exclusive, but inclusive of African Americans. And that's what he's going to do. He's going to make some people mad. He's going to make some people glad. But he knows that's what he got to do because he's going to be held responsible for whatever happened, period. Now, back to the real matter at hand. Everybody's talking about what Vice President Kamala has to do. She needs to go and do more interviews. She do the interviews. Oh, she didn't do the interview right. She go on Fox and do an interview, knowing that Fox is pro-Trump. And when she went on, Fox got more views. They got 7-some million views because she was on. And they tried to whitewash the things that Trump was saying about turning the military on, the people, the enemy within. And she checked them, fact-checked them. Right there on time for the 7 million to see the games that they play. To the point, the interviewer had to come back and say, oh, he made a mistake and he apologized. No, you got busted. But what everybody is not, in my opinion, I already voted, so I know I'm with the right one. For them to think that the women are not mad, regardless of party, are not mad what Trump and his MAGA Republican posse is doing, you took their rights from them. I'm gonna show you what the women are saying. It's almost like the domestic violence. You beat your wife up and everything else, and then you're gonna tell her, go get your food. Fix your food. And she said, okay. And then she tell you it's tomato bits. And here's a Bloody Mary, drink this too. And next thing you know, your throat lock up on you. These women coming to let, in my opinion, to let the men in government know that they're not going to leave it up to them to be concerned about what's right, regardless of party. Republican women, independent women, Democratic women, conservative, liberals. And a lot of their men are standing in lockstep with them. They don't want to show you them polls. But, Sister Monty, could you put that piece on for me?
Reproductive freedom.
Yeah.
And I come from a conservative Christian pro-life family, and I was a Republican until Donald Trump's presidency. Like most Americans, I believe in a woman's right to choose. And with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, my 21-year-old daughter now has fewer rights than her mother or her grandmother's. I no longer recognize the Republican Party. They have introduced bills from everything from restricting birth control to bringing homicide charges for abortion. It is such an extreme, radical agenda by any standards. And it seems less about the unborn and more about controlling women. So my question is, what are your thoughts on this extremism, and how can we restore those fundamental human rights that have been taken away from the American women?
Thank you.
So to your point, when Donald Trump was president, he hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe, and they did as he intended. And now there are at least 20 states in our country that have criminalized healthcare providers, to your point. I mean, in Texas, the law provides for prison for life for a doctor, nurse, healthcare provider for doing what they believe is healthcare and in the best interest of their patient. Punishing women, I was actually just this week, just a few days ago in the state of Georgia with the mother of a young woman who died because of Georgia's abortion ban, and she had to go to another state, and it's a long and very tragic story that did not have to be. And here's how I think about this issue. One does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree that the government, these folks in a state capital, much less Donald Trump, should not be making this decision for her. If she chooses, she will talk with her priest, her pastor, her rabbi, her imam, but not the government. And I also have found, though, since the 2 years that the Dobbs decision came down that this happened, I have had conversations with a number of people who were opposed to abortion and remain opposed to it, but did not intend for the harm that we are seeing to happen. And I think as this decision came down and we are seeing the harm, there are more and more people who are agreeing that this should not be the government making this decision for women and their families. And the way that we will address this is eventually Congress needs to pass a law restoring those protections. And we need to agree that in our society, you know, we should not have laws that are treating people in a way that is causing such harm. I'll give you another example of the harm that is going on. I started my career as a prosecutor. I have prosecuted everything from low-level offenses to homicides. But one of the reasons I became a prosecutor is because when I was in high school, I learned that my best friend was being molested by her stepfather. And so I said to her, you have to come live with us. I called my mother. My mother said, of course, and she did. And I made a decision early in my life that I wanted to do the work that was about protecting vulnerable people. There are some of these bans that include no exception for rape or incest. I have specialized in those kinds of cases. And the notion that we would tell a survivor of a crime that is a violation to their body, that they have no right to make a decision about what happens to their body next, I mean, I think that's just unconscionable. I think it's immoral. And so this is one of the issues that is at play. And when this issue has been on the ballot since the Dobbs decision came down, in so-called red states and so-called blue states, the American people have voted for freedom.
You know, like I've been saying, definitely for the last 150 days. Not that I've been on this show for 150 days straight, but ever since Biden had made a decision that he was dropping out of the race. Before he made that decision, I was with him and with Kamala, because I knew about the 2020 plan. And what I mean by that, they made the decision where the Democrats came together behind a good ticket, which was Biden and Kamala. To win and beat Trump. They had a good roadmap because they know how they lost in 2016 to Trump, where we all went to sleep when we woke up and didn't know what was happening or what had happened, because we had forgot about the electoral votes. So to prove it, what they were talking about, when Biden ran in 2020, he and the Democratic Party knew to go and get those states in the Midwest, swing states they call them. This time they got 2, maybe 3 ways to get to 270 electoral votes. But all we have to do, because it ain't in their hand, it's in our hands, is get out there and vote. Stop talking, stop squawking. Vote, don't choke. Vote. Vote for Kamala. Vote for her to become president and for Tim Watts to become vice president. And vote Democrat so they'll have a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House. So to God be the glory. That's my story. Vote, don't choke.